Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jordan and today I'd like to tell you a little story. So grab some snacks and settle in. Once upon a time, when fanfiction and One Direction were booming, a story was written. This story showed Harry in the limelight and fangirls were smitten. Its spread was rapid, the readers swarming like locusts, and of course the publishers began to take notice. Unfortunately, both Harry and the protagonist were terrible, making the book for most people unbearable, but despite its poor themes and depictions of romance, its financial success made its adaptation advance. And that is when this little story exploded, and online reviewers decoded its motives. Unfortunately, this just helped to promote it. And when I asked what you wanted me to read, this is what you voted. And so, on this cold winter night, we will discuss all that is broken, what is wrong and abusive, for the people have spoken. Hey guys, so before we get into the video proper, I do think it is important to talk seriously for a second. I just felt while I was editing that it needed a little disclaimer of sorts. This book is disturbing. It made me sad, it made me upset, it made me angry, and that's because I know for a fact that there are young people who have and will read this book that will romanticize the abuse and the horrible actions of the characters in the same way that the author has. And I think it's really heartbreaking. I was talking to my brother about some of the problematic tropes and issues of this book, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "There's nothing as damaging to young girls as other young girls' perception of what romance is." And having read some Wattpad fanfictions in my day, I know for a fact that it's a huge issue. And originally I had thought that Anna Todd was 14 or 15 when she wrote the first Wattpad story, and then I found out that she was actually 22. And that just upset me so much because she should have known better by that age. The demographic on Wattpad and the One Direction demographic is very young, especially at that time, and the fact that she wrote this for that audience is like not okay. And then Simon & Schuster looked at it and saw dollar signs instead of damage, and then they made it into a movie. And along this journey, no one stopped to think whether or not this story should be shared because it was profitable. And that just sucks, you know? So I will be roasting this book for you guys, but I want you to know that I feel guilty because I don't want to give this book more of a platform than it already has, because that's how I found out about this book, was through online reviewers, and I'm pretty sure that's how a lot of you found out about this book. So I don't want to support it anymore than it already has been, and I don't want anyone to find this book and be like, oh, it would be funny if I read it, and give this publishing house and this author more money for a book that is so like wrong and bad and disturbing. Please don't pick up this book, please. But with that out of the way, I guess it's time to dive in. The writing in this book is bad. I know. What a shock. I figured we'd start here before I get too worked up about everything else. Basically, over the break, my siblings and I were hanging out, and somehow, through Google, we ended up on a very obscure Wattpad original story that is unedited, unprofessional, just, you know, some kid writing at home. And I came to the startling and horrible realization while I was reading this, because I was also reading after at the same time, that the quality of the writing was pretty much on par with each other, despite having a professional editor hired by one of the big 5 publishers. There were several obvious mistakes of words that were either missing or repeated, and just consistent punctuation errors, as well as just using the same gosh darn word over and over again in the same paragraph. Here's an example of that on page 245. Hardens' lips mold to mine, and my hands travel up his back. His narrow hips grind down on mine, and a whimper escapes my lips. He swallows my gasp as his lips trace mine. Movement for movement. Really? One of the things that irritated me to an almost irrational degree, though, was the fact that she used contractions sparingly and inconsistently. Like, way too sparingly. They would be in a heated argument and would be like, Harden, you are so annoying, instead of you're so annoying. And it would really pull me out of those situations, because when you're heated, no one talks like that. Like, I don't know about you, but if I was angry, I wouldn't say Simon & Schuster should not have published this book, which was not edited to the degree that it should have been. I would say Simon & Schuster shouldn't have published this book, which wasn't edited to the degree that it should have been. But you know, just an example. Another thing that I guess I'll include in the writing was just the inaccuracies and things that didn't make sense. The first being that university classes don't work like high school classes. Tessa goes to the same 5 classes, all 5 of her classes, every day, which just isn't how university operates. And one would think that a 22-year-old Anna Todd would know that, but apparently not. And then she gets an internship and is supposed to go to classes 3 days a week, and then to the internship the other 2 days a week. And that is immediately abandoned after being established, and she just goes to the internship every day, so I don't really know what the purpose of that is. Also, when does this girl get her period? Because she and Harden do the sexy times like every other day for months, and she just never bleeds. And we know for a fact that she's not on birth control, because at one point Harden says, "We've got to get you on birth control so that I can stop using a condom. I really want to be able to feel you," on page 555. Which I have some issues with, because why is his pleasure a priority over what she wants? I mean, she hasn't expressed that she doesn't want to take birth control, but he says it like a demand. But I'm getting ahead of myself. More to come on that later. Another thing that gets brought up but isn't properly explained is Harden's working situation. Like, seriously, when does this kid work? Apparently he has a job, but he's constantly either with Tessa or exploiting her virginity for money. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the things that bothered me the most, though, as far as the inaccuracies, is that despite being a supposedly low-income family, and implying that Tessa and her mother are fairly poor, she does not value hers and other people's objects in the way that someone would if they actually grew up in a low-income household. She readily throws out her sheets when she could easily wash them, destroys Harden's dad's computer, and she goes shopping all the time. When you don't have money, it has a level of control over you that is not communicated in this book. It just seems like it's written by and about someone who's upper middle class, but is described as being poor just to gain sympathy or relatability from the reader, which really doesn't sit well with me. But now I think it's time to dive into the absolute train wreck that is the plot of this book. Right, so it's a bit harder to talk about plot in contemporary coming-of-age romances rather than, say, fantasy, because the plot is less overt. They tend to be more character-driven, which unfortunately is true to this too. But I'm going to do my best to encapsulate what happens in the 600-page masterpiece that is After. Tessa goes to university and gets put in a dorm room with a girl that has tattoos and piercings. Disgusting. She's a classic young adult and or new adult protagonist who definitely isn't like other girls because she likes classic literature, dresses conservatively, and only shaves below the knee. She has a very kind and loving boyfriend named Noah, who's still in high school and is a 2-hour drive away, which is convenient for when she repeatedly cheats on him. This, of course, happens with Hardin Scott, who is a friend of her roommate Steph. He's a complete dick to her and everyone, but who cares, because he's physically attractive and puts his lip ring between his teeth. It's sexy. After getting really drunk for the first time and almost getting assaulted at a party, she runs to Hardin's room because she knows him. He lets her in and then she kisses him, and I'm just gonna say it, even though she kisses him, because she's drunk for the first time, which he knows, and because she's in a vulnerable state, she was just about to be assaulted by a drunk man at a party, I don't think he should have kissed her back, but Hardin just doesn't have a moral code, so of course he does. And apparently neither does Tessa, because she still has a boyfriend. They fight a lot, all the time, and seem to not get along at all, but then she decides that she wants to be friends with him for some reason and goes to a river with him where he fingers her and baby has her first orgasm, and she still has a boyfriend. After getting in yet another fight with Harden and feeling bad about herself because that's what always happens, she calls her boyfriend Noah and asks him to skip class and sports practice and come visit her for the weekend, which he does. He drops everything, he comes to visit her because he loves her. And then on Saturday, she gets a call from Hardin's soon-to-be stepbrother Landon, who tells her that she needs to go to Hardin's father's house because Harden got drunk and is breaking dishes and being super aggressive. And of course, she does. She takes her boyfriend's car, leaves him in her dorm room, goes to this guy's house who's being super violent and aggressive, and calms him down. And then he asks her to stay the night, and she just says yes. And they mess around while her boyfriend is stranded in her dorm room and she's ignoring his calls. The next morning, Harden goes and finds her in her dorm when she gets back and is with Noah, and he reveals that she has been cheating on Noah for a while now, and of course Noah's heartbroken, so he asks for some space to think about it because he needs to process what's going on. But apparently he doesn't need that much time because by the next weekend he's already forgiven her and says that he'll take her back as long as she doesn't hang out with Harden anymore, which fair enough given, you know, her history with him. Yeah, that doesn't last very long though, because pretty much immediately after she hangs up with her boyfriend, Harden comes and she goes with him and they mess around some more. She cheats on Noah again and then again, and eventually Noah comes to surprise her at the university and finds out that she has been seeing Harden some more, and he is devastated when he realizes that she has continued to cheat on him, and then, to kick him while he's down, she breaks up with him and asks him to leave without even looking at him. This guy that she supposedly loves and who has always been there and looked after her. As you can tell, this sets Tessa up to be a truly lovable protagonist, and I think it's because of how kind-hearted and empathetic she is towards other people's emotions. This brings us to section 2 of the book. They fight, they break up, they kiss, they make up. And I think Katy Perry really nailed their relationship in the head with the whole hot and cold song, because that is what they constantly are towards each other. The cycle is this: he is an evil person and he makes her cry by being controlling or possessive or demanding or just straight up mean and insulting and degrading towards her. She then cries and yells at him a bit. She tells him that she can't take it anymore, but then he says he needs her and that he's sorry and he won't do it again. She forgives him because he pleasures her sexually and also because he emotionally manipulates her. Rinse and repeat. That is pretty much the majority of the rest of the book. But we also get another love interest option who's dangled in front of us. This comes in the form of Zed, who is another member of the friend group. And it's really tragic because at the time it seems like he respects her. He doesn't pressure her to do anything that she doesn't want to do. He doesn't take advantage of her. He takes her out on nice dates and does things with her rather than just banging. And so yeah, it really highlights how much she and Harden shouldn't be together and how bad he is for her. But of course it doesn't last because she just goes straight back to Harden, obviously. I want to stress though that it is both Harden and Tessa that are extremely hypocritical and toxic people to each other. He is not the only one at fault and is not the only one to intentionally hurt or manipulate the other person. And I want to make it clear that him being a dick does not excuse her actions towards him and vice versa. Instead, I think it should be said that if your relationship puts you in a position where you're constantly having to tiptoe around the other person so as not to set them off, then that is not a healthy relationship. If you do things to intentionally hurt the other person to the highest degree, then you are not good for each other. And bonus points if you do it semi-regularly. If you keep secrets from the other person, don't trust the other person, or feel pressured to be responsible for changing the other person, then that is a toxic relationship and you should get out. These characters are bad people, but they are also bad for each other. But instead, this is romanticized because spicy sex scenes, am I right? And they move in together and fall in love. She distances herself from her friends because he insists on keeping her a secret. She also, somehow Noah forgives her, and Harden demands that she stop talking to him despite him being her oldest friend, just because he's jealous. And on top of that, Tessa's mom, who is actually kind of a bad person, sees that they're together, living together, and flips out on her and basically removes herself from Tessa's life, which is bad because that leaves Tessa socially dependent on Harden because she's completely isolated. And this all leads us to the grand finale, part 3, which is, this book sucks and should be burned and should just not exist because it's the worst and I hate it. The end of this book reveals that this was worse than you even thought, and that the emotional abuse experienced thus far was only the tip of the iceberg. And that's because Harden at the beginning of the book made a bet for money that he could take Tessa's virginity along with all of Tessa's new friends. He therefore has a monetary stake in all of his interactions with her, and it means that their entire relationship was based on a lie. But of course, the author ends the book with the repetition of the scene that all of this is revealed, but through Harden's perspective, because of course there are other books in the series and they're meant to be together, so she has to show that Harden truly does love her and that he fell in love with her despite all of the horrible things that he did to her. So, you know, it's fine, right? No, it's disgusting. And one of the worst bits too is that their entire friend group, including Steph, Tessa's roommate, is in on the bet and no one told her. Also, Harden had the audacity to show them the condom and Tessa's bloody sheets as evidence that he actually did end up taking her virginity. I think this is maybe one of the reasons why he fetishizes her virginity and her purity, or maybe he's just extra creepy, just, you know, for fun. Regardless, I hate every part of this, and I cannot understand why a major publishing house decided to stand behind such a reckless, damaging, and disturbing story. Right. It's time for the characters. None of them function outside of the purposes that they serve to either Harden or Tessa, so I will likely be talking about them in relation to one of the two protagonists. Let's start with Tessa. Noah serves to be the safe, boring guy who holds Tessa back from her sexual awakening because of his conservative values. He's there so that when Harden makes Tessa orgasm and she discovers all that she's been missing, we don't feel as bad about Tessa cheating because he's not satisfying her. He also provides a roadblock for Tessa and Harden's relationship, or at least I think that's what the intent was, but unfortunately, Tessa doesn't have a heart and doesn't care about hurting him, so he doesn't provide much of a barrier. The whole good guy who's just too much of a square thing also backfired because I just feel bad for him because he's a genuinely good dude who's just trying to do his best and who really cares for Tessa, whereas Tessa and Harden are both terrible people. Steph is Tessa's door into the world of parties and alcohol and just normal college people who want to have a social life. She also ties Tessa to Harden because of sheer proximity. She's not the worst by any stretch, but she does enable Tessa when she's cheating on Noah, which I didn't love, but I also understand because it would be awkward to tell someone to not be a dick. But the thing that I find more inexcusable is the fact that she knew about the bet all along, and the only thing she did was cryptically kind of mention that Tessa shouldn't get involved emotionally with Harden without actually telling her to not get with Harden. Tessa's mom is an extremely judgmental and controlling person who has instilled in Tessa some really bad habits and perspectives about people and the world. She judges people who dress alternatively to an extreme and frankly ridiculous degree. You're supposed to hate her. She's the reason that Tessa is the way she is at the beginning of the book, and why she's been held back from truly living. Landon is another connection to Harden. He's Harden's soon-to-be stepbrother, and he's there to, I guess, tie Tessa to Harden even more, but he felt like he was going to be more important at the beginning of the book than he ended up being. I think his main purpose was to get Tessa to Harden's house on the night that Harden is breaking all of his mom's china and being super aggressive. And he also kind of pushes Tessa to be with Harden rather than with Zed or with Noah. And that's one thing that I found really strange. He also enables Tessa when he finds out that she's cheating on Noah, but he definitely seems like the type of person who would find that morally reprehensible, so it felt very out of character for him. But of course, if all the characters are okay that Tessa's cheating, then it minimizes how absolutely horrible what she's doing is, right? Zed is used by Tessa to make Harden jealous, but he's also in on the bet, and that's one thing that I found a little confusing because I wasn't clear to what degree he was involved in the bet. I'm not sure if he bet against Harden by betting that he would be able to take Tessa's virginity, or if he just bet against Harden that Harden would be able to do it, which, you know, both are very bad, just to a slightly different degree. I had originally assumed that he'd serve as a kind of foil to Harden, but then of course he turns out to be, in retrospect, almost as bad. His inclusion irritated me though because it really only served to highlight how bad Harden is for Tessa, because he was able to treat Tessa with respect and didn't push her or, you know, take advantage of her when he was in the bedroom with her at the party. So it really just highlighted how wrong Harden and Tessa are together, which didn't help. Because of course, Harden doesn't care about those things. And speaking of Harden, let's talk about some of the side characters that pertain to him. Molly is to Harden what Zed is to Tessa. Basically a tool for him to make the other person jealous. And also to provide drama and tension to the relationship. You know, just healthy things. She's not nice to Tessa, but because of Tessa's constant and unwavering slut-shaming, I find it very hard to hate her, and instead it just makes me dislike Tessa even more. But I am going to circle back to this point when we talk about the leading lady herself. And her kind of plot importance is that at the end, she's the one who makes Harden tell Tessa about the bet and the lies. Harden's dad is an interesting inclusion. He's supposed to be the root of all of Harden's problems. The reason he's so messed up. He basically was a drunk when Harden was a kid, and one night he picked a fight with some soldiers at the bar across the street from their home. He left the bar and didn't go home, and instead the soldiers broke in and ended up raping Harden's mother while Harden was watching. It's a truly horrific backstory and didn't feel like it was properly explored at all. Instead, what we see is Harden's dad in the present, who is a nice guy and chancellor of the university, so his arc is fully complete, but the whole purpose of him being there is to highlight Harden's arc, because of course Harden doesn't have an arc with Tessa. He's constantly abusive and manipulative because guys like that don't change, so instead it's more of a forgiveness arc with his dad. But now I think it's time to talk about the man of the hour, our charming love interest. Sorry, I can't even get that sentence out without my body rejecting the notion. This man is a laundry list of every problematic trope that exists, and we are going to go through that list now. To start, he's extremely possessive. He gets violent when she goes on a date with Zed and tries to completely remove Noah after he's forgiven Tess from her life. He also is extremely rude to one of Tessa's new co-workers at her internship because he's friendly with her, and you know, even if he was flirting with Tess, there's no excuse to make her workplace super uncomfortable for her because he gets a little bit jealous. That's not okay. That's not cool. Speaking of violence though, he does get extremely aggressive by breaking plates and punching walls, breaking his dad's keyboard, but he also beats several people up in the book, some random strangers, one of his friends, and then Zed. It's really unsettling, especially because Tess throughout the book insists that he would never get physical with her because she just feels it in her gut. He loves her. He would never do that. But of course, I think that's sending a really damaging message to young girls, and just not even young girls, just women in general, because that's not the case. Very likely, if this was real life, he would eventually hit her, because that's what people who take their frustrations out and take their emotions out physically end up doing. If he gets drunk and starts breaking things and punching things and beating up people, eventually it would happen with her. He's also emotionally abusive and genuinely seems a bit sociopathic, and I hate that, you know, because he would never physically hurt her, it's painted as okay that he can get away with that. It really sends another damaging message that the emotional and mental tormenting that he does is okay. It diminishes the horror that is that type of abuse and control, and I hate it because that can be just as damaging, if not more so, than physical abuse. He weaponizes his past and his nightmares that he has and uses those against her to gain sympathy and help get her to forgive him and to get close to him. He also fetishizes her virginity and her purity, which sends a message that if you're a girl like Molly, then you're less important and less valuable than if you're a girl like Tess. He's also super controlling, and he phrases everything like a command or a demand. He also consistently does things to intentionally hurt her. He throws the fact that his dad got her the interview for the internship in her face and diminishes her role in getting the internship. He also uses her drunk father who left her as a kid in an argument. And the worst part is, Tessa is aware of it all. She knows that it's not okay, she knows that he keeps doing it, but she still gets sucked into the cycle of abuse over and over again. And then, of course, it was all a bet. I have no words. But it's fine though, because he's damaged and Tessa's fixing him. Am I right? But yeah, let's talk about Tessa, because she's not innocent in this either. She is a serial cheater. She cheats on Noah 5 times, and she doesn't care. She just stomps all over his heart despite the fact that he cares for her and she supposedly cares for him. And I honestly don't understand why Anna Todd wrote her to be such a heartless dick when we're clearly supposed to root for her. She's never confronted with the consequences of that decision and instead is easily forgiven, and therefore she never learns from her actions because she never loses anything. She's also extremely judgmental, and I think we're supposed to blame that on her mom, and we can to a certain extent, but judging people on their physical appearance and stereotyping people is an active decision, and I think that it would be irresponsible to blame that solely on the way that she was raised, instead of also giving some of that responsibility to her. She, like Hardin, also has an extremely unhealthy relationship to jealousy, which she takes out on Molly by using some of the most extreme slut-shaming I have ever read in my life. I'm gonna read some of the things that she says, just so that you understand how bad it really is. Page 193. She's so irritating with her stupid pink hair and her skanky clothes. She is a slut. Page 309. We both turn around to see Nate and Molly walking towards us. Great, Molly. She's wearing a tank top and a red leather skirt. It's only Tuesday and she's almost used up her skank quota of the week. She should save that stuff for the weekends. But my personal favorite, 318. Hardin's eyes draw to slits, but I ignore him. Molly is still perched on his lap like the whore she is. It's disgusting. Molly may not be a nice person, but she's also an adult having consenting sexual relations with other adults. Last time I checked, she didn't even cheat on the boyfriend who loves her. At one point, Hardin also asks her if she's OCD, and she says, no, not everyone's crazy just because they like things a certain way. And last time I checked, making fun of a mental disorder is gross. So that is it. I hate these characters, I hate this book. please do not support it. Instead, what I'm going to do is support a worthy cause. So I pledge to donate whatever revenue I make from this video in the first 30 days that it's up to the Canadian Women's Foundation, which has a program called Out of Violence. And here are a couple things that program helps to do. It aids in preventing sexual and labor exploitation, it educates on safety, as well as supporting survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. I'll have a link down below if you would like to donate as well. But that is it. That's all for this video. On a slightly brighter and lighter note, I would like to thank you guys for 25,000 subscribers. I'm really grateful for the community that we've kind of slowly built together and for all of the support that you guys have given me. So thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.